Sheriff, did you anticipate being as famous as you were this weekend?
I had no intention of being famous by any story. My intention was to bring true attention to House Bill 1177, and I guess by that effect, it's working.
What I had told you earlier, that Representative Garnett was saying that specifically you had not reached out to him for a phone call. Hey, let's sit down here. Here's what I think, and maybe he could have taken something to his group of stakeholders to say, hey, would this actually work? Should you have done that?
You know, I guess hindsight being 2020, that would have been great if I would have known he was open to listening. I was working through Sheriff Tony Spurlock for several days in a row, who I believed was in direct connection with Alec Garnett. When it's all said and done, the phone works both ways. If I would have believed that Alec Garnett was truly trying to make a meaningful change to the bill, I would have gladly taken his phone call as well. That didn't occur either.
Now that it's going to be on the governor, now that it's on the governor's desk, and the next step is we're expecting him to sign it. Have you considered yet, if you had a situation that you have your deputies ignore, and someone gets hurt, should you be held liable for whatever happens for that injury?
So I have considered that. That's a very valid question. I'll tell you, I've gone through hundreds of scenarios in my mind. And quite frankly, there's plenty of options for dealing with a situation without using the red flag law. We currently use those now, and that's my intent in the future. I believe we'll still address people that have mental health issues, or we'll address the root problem, which is the person. So whether there's liability to be incurred, you know, I don't know that you could say that about the use or the non-use of the red flag bill. A person is still accountable for their actions, and that's who I want to deal with.
Does that matter to you, the outcome? I know it's all hypothetical, but that seems to be the one outstanding thing. Okay, all these county commissioners have said this. Sheriffs have said, that's not a law we're interested in enforcing.
Sure.
But if it were to happen and someone could pinpoint, this person died because they failed to do this, is that something that would give you pause to say, well, maybe I am at risk of being held accountable for something because somebody got hurt?
Absolutely, that would give me pause. Like I've said before, my goal isn't just to go out and willy-nilly say I'm going to refuse to try to work through this process in any other manner other than just absolute refusal. My goal is to work with the court system and try to find a balance that works and furthers the argument to determine whether or not these bills are actually constitutional while still protecting people within my own county.
So if you were presented with a red flag issue, you talk about different steps. What other steps would you be taking?
So there's so many different paths that a red flag issue can take through this particular law. I will tell you, as a law enforcement agency, we won't be seeking those out. But if an independent person goes down and petitions for one, and then I receive an order from a judge, that would be the balancing test that I would have to talk with the judge and figure out, okay, what are you asking me to do? If it's just advising this person of a court hearing, we do that every day. But if it's that order that also is accompanied by a search warrant demanding me to go take someone's firearms, that I would have major issue with, and that's where we would probably have that battle in the courts.
What other avenues would you have? If you didn't want to go in and take that person's weapon, what could you be doing instead?
Well, there's always the opportunity to sit down and talk with the judge and say, look, we don't mind issuing the order to tell this person that they have a court date. We don't mind going and assessing them to see if they're an imminent risk to themselves or others, and use the mental health hold statute to treat the person. But to go in and conduct a search warrant on someone's home based on the word of a third party, I think that's a huge overreach of the Constitution, and that's where I'd have to draw the line.
What would you not do at that point? Is there anything else in law that you could detain the person or something else, or are you suggesting an alternative?
So, Marshall, that's a question that I can't answer, because every situation that we deal with has so many complexities to it. There's not one answer that fits every circumstance. That's, again, the problem with this red flag bill. I think it's an answer to some people in that we're going to go in and take someone's guns, and that automatically deems the issue safe. That couldn't be farther from the truth. And so I guess my argument would be, if we did go in and take someone's firearms and that person still went out and committed an act of violence, wouldn't I be as liable then as if I took their firearms? This bill doesn't address the root issue, and that's mental health. If it did, I think you would see support for it across the state. But but it sorely misses on that, and that's where I have the issue.
I saw in civil protection orders and in domestic situations, assault, sexual assault, something like that, that could also require the person being petitioned against to have to give up their weapons. You do that. What are you okay? Are you okay with that?
Well, we serve those orders now. So an order from a judge on a temporary protection order keeping 2 persons apart, that order may state that a person is not allowed to own a firearm. What that order doesn't do is compel law enforcement to go conduct a search warrant on that person's house. It also gives that person the right to give those weapons to a third party. It gives them some rights in dealing with how they're going to secure their weapons. The red flag bill doesn't have those same provisions. In fact, it negates those provisions.
Okay. Let me just make sure. There was one question I wanted to make sure I phrased right. I think I did it. Have you asked for advisement from county commissioners of the attorney here? Could you be sued in a situation where you refuse the judge's order to search?
So we've had lots of discussions about the legal ramifications if I refuse to go conduct one of these ex parte search warrants. The responses are all over the board. Obviously, there's attorneys from across the state and the county attorney circles that have differing opinions. I believe my county commissioners and my county attorney believe we're on firm ground, and I do as well, and we're going to continue to push this narrative to try to make sure we get a court of higher jurisdiction to make a determination.
Do you want to be part of the process that establishes the protocol for how to respond to something like this, even if you're not interested in following the protocol?
I've been invited to be on that team, and I'm interested in going down and being a part of that, if nothing more than to try to make people understand that a search warrant is a very significant step, and if we're going to create best practices, we ought to at least think about protecting someone's right against an unlawful search and seizure, and think about, severely think about how this red flag order could be unjustly used on someone.
Do you think you're going to forever now be known as the sheriff who's willing to go to jail?
You know, I hope not. That was never my goal. My goal wasn't to be known in this issue. My goal was to try to bring light to a fact that I think we're passing a law in this state that is against our U.S. Constitution in many facets. You know, those coined phrases of the sheriff that's willing to go to jail, you know, that reads well, I guess, in some circles. You know, that's the absolute last thing I would like to see happen for obvious reasons, but I've made a stand. I've said that in the worst case scenario, that's what could happen, and I believe that I'm willing to stand to that bitter end.
Subscribe to the Next YouTube channel for the best of Next and some other stuff.